House, shrouded in mystery, nestled deep within an untamed forest where towering oak trees stretch toward the sky, their twisted branches casting long, eerie shadows that dance in the moonlight. The atmosphere is thick with the earthy scent of damp soil, and the silence is so intense that it feels as though the very world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. This is the world of Ghosts of Manor House, a novel that invites you to step into a realm where time blurs and terror takes root, ready to guide you on a chilling journey that will linger in your soul long after you've left its pages. The slow-burning horror, a tale of unease. From the moment you begin Ghosts of Manor House, you are ensnared by its ability to evoke a creeping sense of dread that builds with every word. This is not your typical horror story filled with sudden shocks or jump scares. Instead, it excels at cultivating an atmosphere of deep, unsettling terror that slowly unravels, layer by layer. The true horror here lies not in the sudden fright, but in the gradual realization that something is profoundly, inescapably wrong. As you delve deeper into the story, the weight of the manor's dark history begins to press down on you. This is a history soaked in pain, secrets, and untold suffering. Matt Powers, the author, crafts a narrative so immersive that you feel the cold grip of fear tighten as the story progresses. The horror unfolds with a deliberate pace, pulling you further into its twisted reality until you find yourself completely absorbed in the terrifying world Powers has created. The Haunted Manor, a living, breathing entity. The Manor House is more than just a backdrop. It is a character in its own right, imbued with a malevolent presence that pervades every corner of the story. Each creak of the ancient floorboards, each flicker of a candle, each gust of wind rattling the windows feels alive, sentient, as if the house itself is watching, waiting, biding its time. Powers' vivid descriptions bring the manor to life, making it almost tangible. A place where you can almost feel the chill in the air and the rough texture of the ancient oak trees' gnarled branches scratching against the windows like skeletal fingers. Inside, the manor is filled with the remnants of a forgotten past, portraits of long-dead ancestors whose eyes seem to follow your every move, echoing laughter and distant screams that seem to reverberate through the dimly lit corridors. The air is thick with the scent of old wood and decaying memories, creating an atmosphere so oppressive that it feels as though the house is closing in on you, trapping you in its dark embrace. The characters, lost souls in a haunted world. At the heart of this chilling tale is Edmund, the protagonist, whose journey through the manor is as much an exploration of his own haunted psyche as it is of the house itself. The dreams that plague him are as vivid as they are terrifying, forcing him to confront the darkest, most hidden corners of his mind. These visions are described with such intensity that you can almost feel the raw emotion pulsing beneath the surface, emotions so powerful that they threaten to overwhelm him, and you. Supporting characters like Lucas and Mrs. Crane add further layers of intrigue and tension. Their attempts to keep the manor's secrets hidden only serve to heighten the suspense, though there are moments when the reader might feel a step ahead, already piecing together the mysteries that elude Edmund. Nevertheless, their roles are crucial in weaving the complex narrative web that Powers masterfully spins. The duality of beauty and horror, a storytelling triumph. Despite a few minor flaws, Ghosts of Manor House is a beautifully crafted tale that delivers a satisfying and chilling conclusion. The intricate plot, though sometimes slow-paced, builds to a crescendo that is both shocking and inevitable, leaving you breathless as the final pieces of the puzzle fall into place. Powers' decision to mirror the prologue and epilogue provides a sense of closure that is often elusive in horror literature, giving the story a completeness that resonates long after the book is closed. The subplot involving Mary's brother and the clairvoyant introduces a surreal, almost dreamlike quality to the narrative. While these characters may not be central to the main plot, they add depth and richness to the story, intertwining the supernatural with the psychological in a way that elevates the novel above typical horror fare. Their presence adds an extra layer of complexity, making the story not just about the manor's ghosts, but about the many forms of haunting, both physical and psychological, that torment the characters. Final thoughts: a haunting experience for true horror enthusiasts. Ghosts of Manor House is more than just a horror novel, it is an experience that demands to be savored. This is a story that invites you to slow down, to immerse yourself in its world, and to let its creeping dread settle into your bones. The horror here is subtle, insidious, seeping into your thoughts and making you question the boundaries between reality and imagination. For fans of horror that lingers in the mind, that challenges your perceptions, and that continues to haunt you long after the final page, Ghosts of Manor House is a must-read. It is a masterclass in atmospheric, slow-burn horror, a story that will stay with you, echoing in the quiet corners of your mind, long after It was 1 a.m., and the stillness of the Amritsar airport was broken only by the occasional hum of a plane in the distance. My eyes kept flicking to the clock on my phone, frustration building as the minutes ticked by. Where is this guy? I thought, my patience wearing thin. I dialed my uncle's number again, hoping for some clarity, only to be met with an almost casual response. Oh, you're still there? Plans changed. He's already stopped in New Delhi. No need to wait. Head back home. A wave of annoyance washed over me. Damn it. What a waste of time, I muttered, turning towards the parking lot, each step heavy with irritation. As I neared my car, something caught my attention. A man sitting alone on the pavement, his luggage beside him. He was staring up at the streetlights with an intensity that made me uneasy, as if searching for something hidden in the glow. Hey! Are you waiting for someone? I called out, my voice cutting through the silence. He didn't answer immediately, his gaze still fixed on the lights. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. I was waiting for a cab, but couldn't find one. There was something off about him, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But I brushed it aside, thinking he was just a weary traveler in need of a ride. Where are you headed, Paji? I asked, hoping to help. I'm going to Gurdaspur, he replied, his voice flat and emotionless. A coincidence, I thought. I'm headed there too. Hop in, I'll give you a lift, I offered, forcing a smile despite the unease creeping into my mind. The strange passenger. The man slowly stood, still glancing at the streetlights as if they held some secret he was desperately trying to decipher. I bent down to pick up his luggage, intending to put it in the trunk. Suddenly, he shouted, "No. Not there. Put it inside the car." His outburst startled me. Just moments ago, he seemed so indifferent, and now he was panicking over where his bags should go. Regretting my offer but not wanting to cause a scene, I nodded and placed his luggage inside the car. As I settled into the driver's seat, I noticed something odd. He had chosen to sit in the back, his eyes now focused on the rearview mirror. Why don't you sit up front? I suggested, trying to make the situation less awkward. No, I'm fine here, he replied curtly. A chill ran down my spine. Something about him was undeniably strange, but I tried to shake off the feeling as I adjusted the mirror, keeping him in my peripheral vision as I started the engine. As we drove, I realized he wasn't just looking out the window, he was watching the streetlights as they passed, counting them one by one. His eyes never left the mirror, and neither did mine leave him. The midnight drive. The road stretched out ahead of us, dark and deserted, with only the sound of the car engine breaking the oppressive silence. Tall trees lined the road, their branches casting eerie shadows that danced in the headlights' beam. The midnight drive. The road stretched out ahead of us, dark and deserted, with only the sound of the car engine breaking the oppressive silence. Tall trees lined the road, their branches casting eerie shadows that danced in the headlights' beam. Drive faster, he suddenly demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. His tone unnerved me, but I pressed harder on the accelerator. From the rearview mirror, I could see sweat glistening on his forehead, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to leap out of the darkness. What's wrong with this guy? I wondered, my anxiety spiking as we sped down the lonely road. The night seemed to close in around us, the silence more oppressive than ever. As we approached a Gurudwara, the man's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Stop the car! Stop the car!" he screamed, his voice filled with terror. I slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a sudden halt near the gate. Before I could ask what was wrong, the man flung open the door and bolted towards the Gurudwara, shouting for help. The terrifying revelation. My heart pounded as I watched the scene unfold. A group of men from the Gurudwara rushed out, armed and ready, their faces set in grim determination. "He's mad," I tried to explain, my voice shaky, but the man's wild eyes met mine, filled with sheer terror. He pointed frantically towards the roof of my car, urging the men to look. Fear clawed at my chest as I turned to see what had terrified him so deeply. But the roof was empty. Still, his fear was so palpable, so intense, that it began to infect me as well. "They're here," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They've been following me, ever since that night." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His story spilled out in a rush. He had been working on a construction site in Dubai when they unearthed 2 ancient graves. Without hesitation, he had ordered the graves to be cleared, ignoring the warnings of his superstitious workers. That night, he saw them, the spirits of a mother and her daughter, witches who had been disturbed from their rest. "They followed me," he continued, his voice trembling. "At the airport, they were on the streetlights, watching me. When you picked me up, they came with us. They were on the roof, then inside the car. The witches from the grave." A chill crept down my spine as he spoke. His fear was so tangible, so real, that I found myself glancing back at the car, half expecting to see the witches he described. "When I told you to drive faster, it was because the mother witch was standing right in front of the car, and her daughter was waving at us from the side of the road," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't say anything because I was too scared. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as sand. Stories of ghosts and witches were one thing, but this felt real, too real. His terror was contagious, and I found myself scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. He refused to return to the car, insisting on staying at the Gurudwara for the night, surrounded by the safety of the crowd. "They don't come when I'm with others," he explained, his voice still shaking. As dawn broke, he left in a crowded bus, convinced that the witches wouldn't follow him. I watched him go, still haunted by his words and the events of the night. The haunting aftermath. It took a full day for me to gather the courage to drive my car again. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see those witches staring back at me. The man's story had left a mark on me, a lingering sense of dread that I couldn't shake. I never saw him again, and to this day, I don't know what became of him. But the memory of that night stays with me, a dark shadow that haunts my thoughts. Now, I think twice before offering rides to strangers, especially in the dead of night. The fear, whether born of reality or imagination, still lingers, a reminder of the strange encounter that forever changed my nights. The camera zooms in on a dimly lit room adorned with posters of thin models and actresses. Kavya, a teenage girl with a haunted expression, is reflected in the mirror as she stares critically at herself. Kavya was like any other teenager, caught in the relentless pursuit of perfection, the perfect body, the perfect face, the perfect life. But no matter how hard she tried, she could never escape the reflection that seemed to mock her every move. Kavya frowns, her hands running over her stomach with frustration. Suddenly, her phone buzzes, pulling her out of her spiraling thoughts. It's a message from her best friend, Noor. The sleepover begins. Kavya's face lights up as she eagerly types back a reply. She jumps out of bed, pacing her room with growing excitement. She glances at the clock, anticipation bubbling inside her. Kavya finally, a sleepover with Noor. It's been so long. We have so much to catch up on, and so many games to play. The doorbell rings, and Kavya dashes out of her room, her heart pounding with excitement. The camera follows her through the cozy, warmly lit hallway. Kavya's mother emerges from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel as she warmly greets Noor. Kavya's mother, Noor. It's so good to see you. You must be hungry. Come, have some dinner. Noor politely shakes her head, glancing at Kavya, who quickly interjects with a playful grin. Kavya, no, Mom. Noor already ate, and I'm on a diet, remember? Kavya's mother frowns slightly but doesn't push further. She watches as the girls rush off to Kavya's room, the door closing behind them with a loud click. The sleepover activities. Inside Kavya's room, the girls are laughing and taking selfies, surrounded by a mess of soft toys, nail polish, and a camera. Kavya's laughter is genuine, but her eyes occasionally flicker towards the mirror, reflecting her insecurities. Kavya pauses, picking up a magazine with a model on the cover. Her expression darkens as she stares at the image. Kavya, softly, almost to herself, I wish I could be like them, so skinny, so perfect. Noor notices the shift in Kavya's mood and gently tries to comfort her. Noor, you're beautiful just the way you are, Kavya. Don't let these images mess with your head. Kavya forces a weak smile, but Noor's words do little to ease her troubled mind. Suddenly, the door opens, and Kavya's mother enters with a plate of snacks. Kavya's mother, I brought you some food, just in case you get hungry later. Kavya avoids eye contact, nodding absent-mindedly as her mother places the plate on the table. The girls resume their activities, but Kavya's mood is noticeably dampened. Her eyes keep darting to the plate of food, the temptation gnawing at her. The late-night hunger. The room is now dark and silent. The only light comes from the moon filtering through the curtains. Kavya lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her mind races with thoughts of the models, the food, and her weight. She suddenly feels an overwhelming thirst. Sitting up, she rubs her dry throat. The glass of water on the table is empty. With a sigh, she quietly slips out of bed, careful not to wake Noor. The camera follows her down the dark hallway to the kitchen. The house is eerily quiet, the only sound being the faint creak of the floorboards under her feet. Kavya opens the fridge, the cool light illuminating her face as she grabs a bottle of water and takes a long drink. Her stomach growls loudly, reminding her of the food she avoided earlier. She hesitates before giving in, pulling out a piece of cake left over from dinner. As she turns to leave, a chill runs down her spine. She freezes, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. Slowly, she makes her way back to her room, but something feels off. The camera lingers on her tense face, capturing the growing fear within her. The horror unfolds. As Kavya approaches her room, she notices something strange. The door is slightly ajar, a soft light spilling into the hallway. Her heart begins to race as she cautiously pushes the door open wider. To her horror, she sees that the plate of food she left untouched earlier is now completely empty. She stares at it, her mind racing with confusion and fear. Kavya's breathing becomes shallow as she slowly turns towards the bed. Her blood runs cold as she sees a dark, shadowy figure perched on top of Noor's body. The creature is grotesque, with hollow eyes and a twisted smile, gnawing at Noor's flesh with sickening ease. Kavya's eyes widen in terror, her mind unable to process the nightmarish scene before her. The creature slowly turns its head towards her, its mouth dripping with blood. It grins, a cruel, mocking expression that sends chills down her spine. Kavya stumbles back, her breath catching in her throat. She watches in horror as the creature continues to devour Noor, the sound of tearing flesh and dripping blood filling the room, creating a grotesque symphony of horror. Kavya's body trembles as she tries to scream, but no sound comes out. She is paralyzed with fear, unable to move or look away. The creature's gaze remains locked on hers, as if taunting her, relishing in her terror. The nightmare revealed. Suddenly, Kavya jolts awake, drenched in sweat. Her breathing is ragged, her heart pounding violently in her chest. She frantically looks around, realizing she's still in bed. Noor is lying next to her, unharmed and peacefully asleep. Kavya's mind races as she tries to convince herself it was just a nightmare. She takes deep breaths, trying to calm herself, but the fear lingers, gnawing at her. The camera zooms in on the plate on the table, revealing it to be empty, just as it was in the nightmare. Kavya stares at it in shock, her fear intensifying. She slowly turns to look at Noor, who stirs slightly but remains asleep. Kavya lies back down, pulling the covers up to her chin, her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. She tries to shake off the terror, but the image of the creature devouring Noor haunts her, replaying in her mind over and over. As she finally drifts off to sleep, the camera pans to the window, where a shadowy figure can be seen lurking just outside, watching over her. The scene fades to black, leaving the audience with an unsettling sense of dread. The final twist. The next morning, Kavya wakes up feeling groggy and disoriented. She sits up, rubbing her eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of the nightmare. She glances over at Noor's bed and freezes. Noor is gone. The bed is neatly made, as if no one had slept in it. Kavya's heart skips a beat as she quickly gets out of bed, searching the room for any sign of her friend. But Noor is nowhere to be found. Kavya's mind races with panic. She rushes to the door, calling out for Noor, but there's no response. The house is eerily quiet, and a sense of dread washes over her. She hesitantly walks back to the table, her eyes falling on the empty plate. The camera zooms in on her trembling hand as she picks it up, the weight of the situation sinking in. Kavya's mother enters the room, a concerned look on her face. Kavya's mother. Kavya, are you okay? What's wrong? Kavya turns to her, her voice trembling. Kavya, Mom, where's Noor? Kavya's mother frowns, confused. Kavya's mother, Noor? What are you talking about, Kavya? You've been alone all night. Kavya's face pales as she stares at her mother in disbelief. Her mind reels with confusion and fear. Was it all just a nightmare? Or was Noor ever really there? The camera lingers on Kavya's shocked expression as the scene fades to black. The hidden shadows of Koda, a city renowned for molding the destinies of countless aspiring students, conceals a much more sinister truth beneath its academic exterior. Beyond the relentless pursuit of success lies a realm unknown to many, a world where the fabric of reality frays and the shadows of the night whisper secrets too terrifying to comprehend. This is the story of Vishal, a young dreamer drawn to Koda, whose dreams led him to the city, but whose nightmares nearly consumed him. Entering the labyrinth, Vishal arrived in Koda with dreams brimming with hope and the heavy weight of his parents' expectations resting on his shoulders. The city, pulsating with the energy of thousands of students, felt strange and overwhelming. The towering coaching institutes, imposing and austere, cast long shadows over him, symbolizing the immense pressure that weighed on his mind. His father, a man of few words, helped him settle into a small PG room, a temporary refuge that would soon become a nightmarish prison. As his father drove away, leaving him alone in this sea of strangers, a wave of isolation crashed over Vishal. Standing in the doorway, he watched the car disappear, feeling a deep sense of abandonment. The silence of his new surroundings pressed in on him, amplifying the gnawing anxiety that lurked within. The unexpected companion, the PG where Vishal stayed, had 2 rooms on the first floor, connected by a narrow hallway that led to the roof. In the adjacent room lived Vinit, another student. Vishal met him on his first evening, both seeking respite from their oppressive rooms under the cool night sky. Vinit, like Vishal, was quiet and introspective. Their initial exchanges were awkward, filled with hesitant pauses and unspoken thoughts. But as time passed, they discovered shared struggles, the relentless grind of classes, the suffocating weight of expectations, and the paralyzing fear of failure. Slowly, a bond formed between them, a fragile friendship that grew amidst the stress and strain of their environment. The grind and the ominous signs days in Coda passed in a blur of classes, study sessions, and exhaustion. The students moved through their routines like clockwork, their faces pale and drawn from lack of sleep and the constant pressure to excel. Vishal found solace in the evenings when he and Vinit would retreat to the roof, sharing stories, laughter, and brief moments of escape from their heavy burdens. But beneath the surface of these comforting rituals, something dark and sinister began to stir. Vishal's first inkling of this came one morning when he walked into Vinit's room and was met with a disturbing sight: torn photographs of gods and deities scattered across the floor. The shredded images, once symbols of divine protection, now seemed to mock the very idea of sanctuary. When Vishal questioned him, Vinit's response was unsettlingly vague. He claimed he intended to replace the pictures with those of a specific deity, but his evasive tone suggested there was more to the story. Although Vishal let the matter drop, the image of those torn photos lingered uneasily in his mind. A night of unimaginable terror. One night, Vishal was abruptly awakened by a loud, rhythmic thudding coming from Vinit's room. His heart raced as he glanced at the clock, 2 a.m. The noise was eerie, like someone repeatedly lifting and dropping the edge of a bed. An unfamiliar fear gripped Vishal, an icy dread that crept into his bones. He had never been one to fear the dark or solitude, but that night, something felt deeply wrong. Gathering his courage, he called out, "Vinit, are you all right?" To his horror, he heard the unmistakable sound of Vinit's door unlocking from the inside. But what followed was even more terrifying: the sound of footsteps, quick and urgent, running across the hall and towards the roof. Vishal's breath caught in his throat. He jumped out of bed and immediately locked his own door, his mind racing with nightmarish possibilities. The unseen horror. Vishal sat trembling on his bed, shivering despite the warm night. The dim light from the washroom filtered through the curtains, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He considered looking outside but was paralyzed by the fear of what he might see. Instead, he buried himself under his blanket, straining to hear any sound. But the night remained eerily silent. The next morning, the terror of the previous night felt distant, like a bad dream. Vishal hurried to the roof, where he found Vinit reading a newspaper, completely at ease. "Good morning. Slept in today?" Vinit greeted him, seemingly oblivious to the horrors of the night before. Still shaken, Vishal tried to make small talk, avoiding any mention of the incident. But when Vinit casually mentioned forgetting to lock his door the previous night, Vishal's blood ran cold. He distinctly remembered hearing the door lock. What was happening? He wanted to confront Vinit, to tell him everything, but fear sealed his lips. A chilling revelation. As days passed, the memory of that night haunted Vishal, but he couldn't bring himself to speak of it. Then, one evening, as they talked on the roof, he finally gathered the courage to tell Vinit about the night he heard the door unlock and the footsteps running towards the roof. To Vishal's surprise, Vinit was unfazed, his response even more unsettling. "You see that road over there?" Vinit pointed to a dark, desolate street a few blocks away. "I woke up there once in the middle of the night, with no memory of how I got there. It was pitch black, and dogs were barking at me. I was terrified, crying, but I eventually found my way back. I still have no idea how I ended up there." As Vinit recounted his eerie experience, a cold dread gripped Vishal. The city, the house, even the very air they breathed, seemed tainted by something unseen, something malevolent. And then, Vinit dropped the final bombshell. "I didn't tear those photos, Vishal. I would never do such a thing. When I woke up, they were already shredded." Living with the haunting, that was the last time they spoke of the strange occurrences. An uneasy truce with the unknown settled over them, but Vishal's fear never entirely faded. Every night, he lay awake, listening for any sign of the unnatural. But the house remained quiet. Or perhaps, as Vishal feared, he had simply become a deeper sleeper, one who might sleep through anything, even the horrors that lurked in the dark. Vishal's father urged him to leave the haunted PG, to move somewhere safer, but Vishal stayed. Not out of courage, but out of a strange, inexplicable attachment to the place. The house had woven itself into his soul, its shadows entangling with his being. Epilogue: Echoes of unanswered fears. What truly happened in that small PG room in Kota? Was Vinit merely a sleepwalker, lost in the labyrinth of his own mind, or was there something darker, something more sinister at play? The torn photos, the mysterious footsteps, the unexplained journey to the dark road, all pointed to an invisible presence, an enigma that defied understanding. Vishal never found the answers. The years passed, and the memories of Kota faded, but the unease never left him. Sometimes, in the dead of night, he would awaken, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding as if he were still in that small, haunted room, still hearing the rhythmic thudding, still waiting for the footsteps to return. Kota may be a city that prepares its students for the future, but for Vishal, it also prepared him for a lifetime of questions. Questions that would never be answered, fears that would never fully fade. And somewhere in that city, in a small PG room, the shadows still linger, waiting patiently for the next unsuspecting student to cross the threshold.